Papadoc,
Papadoc.
January 10th, 08.
Let me get my wits about me here.
It's about your dad and the briefcase.
Going up to Houston.
We had 19, I think it was in the 40s, that my dad knew an uncle that he had in Little Washington, Pennsylvania, and he asked me to go with him on this bus ride. Now, I didn't know what was going on at all. I think I was 17 maybe or 18 at the time. Brothers were all in service, and we get on the Greyhound bus to Little Washington. And Little Washington, then my uncle lived in a little town called Houston. And I was there with my cousins for a couple of days and stayed overnight. I remember that. And a typical Italian dinner that night, and meatballs and spaghetti and chicken and all that good stuff. And then we got ready to leave the next day, and I never knew what my dad did then, but he said he had a big leather suitcase like they have up in Ellis Island. You ever been to Ellis Island? Mm-hmm. All them old time suitcases, about a half as long as this couch. And I remember we brought 8 jugs with us, 8 empty jugs with a lot of newspaper, and I just couldn't figure out what the hell was going on with it. So he said, all right, Pete, said, you get that suitcase and we got to put it in the bus. Well, it was all I could do to lift it. It was the heaviest damn thing. He got on the Moonshine with all that wrappings and everything. I got on the bus, and all I could do to put it over the overhead rack, you know. You had to put it over the overhead. There's no room to leave it in the aisle. I got it up on the rack, and we, unfortunately, we had to change buses in Morgantown, I think it was, yeah. So if you remember the way the bus terminal was in Morgantown, you come off a high street there, University Avenue, and you make a swing around, and they had little restrooms on the right, and it was like a passageway through this, like a tunnel. And my dad had bladder problems, and he said, I gotta go to the restroom. Finally got that damn grip off the bus, and set it down along the edge of the driveway. He said, I'm going to go in the restroom. I said, well, go ahead. I'll watch the grip, don't worry about it. Well, after about 10 minutes, what seemed like an eternity, you know, I wanted to go to the restroom too. And I said, well, hell, ain't nobody going to follow this grip. You know, so I left the grip in the middle of the driveway where the bus was going to come through. But out of the way, you know. And boy, when I came through that little restaurant, getting ready to go to the restroom, he saw me, and man, I tell you, he just lost it. Where's the grip? It's out there in the driveway. Get the hell out there. You know, I lost the urge of going to the restroom. Sure, I went back out there. Never did get to go to the restroom. Well, here comes the bus then to go from Little Washington to Uniontown to Morgantown, and then Morgantown to a couple other little towns between Morgantown and Fairmont. Made a couple little stops. It was a Reynolds Line bus, little bus. It was almost like these stretch limos. Well, the racks overhead weren't as big, see, and I had to get that great big grip up over that little rack, and it was only a little rubber band that, you know, that held the luggages up there. I just worried to death that damn thing was going to fall. Well, it never did, thank God. But anyway, I told my dad, go ahead and sit down. No, he said, you go ahead and sit down. 2 seats real narrow. My dad was a big guy, and I got in. He said, no, you get in there first. And boy, when I got in there, he put his whole weight against me, like, I'm going to get you later for leaving that grip where you had no business abandoning that loot. Damn, I said, just never ends in my own mind, you know. So we got off before we got to the terminal and went down this alley. And boy, it's all I could do to carry that damn thing. My dad couldn't do anything because he was -1 kidney, and he absolutely refused to do anything. You know, he didn't want to. I guess the doctor told him early on from Baltimore, he said, look, you don't do anything about lifting or anything, so he never did do anything. Well, anyway, That ended that story, only to find out that it was 8 gallons of moonshine, just looked like 8 gallons of water. And the way Donnie doctored that thing up, you put a little sugar in the skillet, and you fry it a little bit, and make like a syrup. You pour that in that gallon, maybe 2 or 3 spoons of that brown turns into brown sugar. And when it hit that gallon jug, it just turned like a gallon of Jack Daniels. I mean, it was just like beautiful bourbon, you know. And them coal miners and stuffies, man, they just drink that stuff up like it's nothing, you know. But anyway, that was what white lightning was. But that was one little story there. Another time when my brothers were in service, and my brother Jack was over in the Pacific, and in the Leyte invasion, and Donnie didn't get any letter from him for, it was almost 30 days. And boy, it was tough living with Donnie with all the brothers gone, you know, just me. So I found one of his letters that he had written like a year earlier, you know, and I very carefully doctored up the stamp when it was sent and the date and everything. And then in a burst of excitement, I said, "Oh, Mom," it was about 11 o'clock in the morning when the mailman came to, and I said, "Oh, got a letter from Jack." Oh, man, she was so happy. She started crying. She read that letter. Yeah, she was, I watched her in just kind of mixed emotions. And an hour later, she must have read it 2 or 3 times. And she said, she said, "I think I said, where'd you get this letter from?" Oh, she knew the jig was up, you know, but for a little while, it was a happy moment. Then I think 2 or 3 days later, we did finally get a letter that was okay. But oh, she thought that was something else. I did too. But at the time, we pacified her a little while. But if you can imagine her 3 sons in service and 1 in the Pacific when the kamikaze planes, his ship got hit with a suicide plane. 13 sailors was killed on that ship, and it tore off part of the bow, and then it limped right in here in San Diego. Right here where it says Port of San Diego, that's where he came into.
Wow.
So it was interesting I called him the other day. Well, last time when I called him, I talked to him so long ago. It's about 30 degrees there tonight. But anyway, let's see, what's another story?
How you
Oh
met
yeah,
Grandma?
you talked about, huh?
How you met Grandma?
About Donnie?
No, how you
Grandma
met
Jane.
Grandma? Grandma Jane.
Oh, how I met her?
Yeah.
Yeah, well, first time you saw her.
At the gas station. She came in the ugliest car I ever did see, and I never did see that car anymore after that.
How
It was
old
one
were
of
you?
a kind. It was a 38 Studebaker.
How old were you?
21 or 22, I can't remember. About that age. She come driving in, I recognized the car because her dad would get the gas. They only bought 5 gallons twice a month. I mean, hell, they didn't have too many cars on the road back then days. So when I saw the car coming in, I saw this pretty girl coming driving in. She wanted 5 gallons of gas. And then to boot, she said, charge it. I said, charge it to who? I said, charge it to my dad. I said, who's your dad? She told me, and I said, yeah, that's all right. I know who your dad is. I let on a little bit like I didn't know, but I knew who her dad was. And then from that time on, I just told her, I said, you like to go to the movie sometime? Yeah.
You asked her that day?
I don't remember, but maybe I did. Maybe I said, would you like to go to the movie sometime? Or something like that. I said, I have to ask my mom. That got my attention real quick. I said, that's pretty good. You can't even take a girl to the movies. You got to check with her mother. I got real interested in it. Well, a day or 2 later, I said there's going to be an army dance. My brother came in for furlough, and there was going to be an army dance. I said, tell your mother that we may not get into at 1 or 2 o'clock in the morning. And she said, Mother, Pete wants to take me to a dance, but he said we may not get home till 1 or 2 o'clock in the morning. And she yelled out like a wild woman. No, she says no. So Dan came back to the phone and said, well, I can't go. I said, yeah, I heard her. We'll go to a movie then sometime. I said, okay. So we went to a movie there in Farmington. You can imagine a little movie house in Farmington, no bigger than this room here. I don't know, maybe 20 seats, 30 seats.
Remember what movie it was?
It's probably Tim Mix or Tom Maynard or Ken Maynard or
Casablanca.
yeah, maybe. Nah, I doubt that. I don't remember what the movie was.
Yeah, he was only 11 years old
10 or 11 years old.
when Casablanca came out.
Oh. Well, anyway, then from then on we dated a couple, 3 times, and before you know it, I was dating her regularly. And one time we had a big snow. I can't remember the year, but I wanted to take Dad's car out of the garage, and when I backed out of the garage, it went down kind of a slope. Couldn't go backwards or forwards then. I said, oh my God, I said, this damn car's stuck. I was about that deep. Her dad was up sleeping because he had to go to work at night. 11 o'clock at night, he worked night shift. And boy, she finally got up, hell, we were trying to push that car back in the garage. Never did get it in. I don't know what happened. He was ticked off. I don't know, somebody else that night, or he walked to work. Yeah, I walked to number 8, which is about 3 or 4 miles down the road. But he may have worked that night. I don't know. They would miss a shift at work for nothing.
So he'd walk 4 miles as opposed
He
to
may
missing
have
a
walked
shift?
that night. I can't remember, but
I mean, he would have walked 4 miles in the snow as opposed to missing a shift.
yeah, he'd walk. Well, sure. He'd drink a half a glass of water. Like I see that water in that water glass. Every night before he'd go to work, that's how much whiskey he'd drink raw. And then put a chaw in his mouth, metal pouch tobacco, put that red handkerchief around his neck and head out the door. Did that for like, I don't know, about 30 years. He was a pumper at the mines. Made sure that the pumps were running to take the water out of the mine and take the air out, whatever they had to take out of the mines, just a lot of hard work, a lot of tough times. And then you talk about Nonnie making bread. Yeah, she'd make bread, make 50 pounds of bread a week, 50 pounds of flour a week.
50 pounds of flour?
Yeah, 50 pounds of flour. Today we made 2 cups for three pizzas. 2 cups of flour. She made 50 pounds. By herself, no help. It was all us boys, there was no girls. Aunt Lucille was the only girl, but she was little. And everybody got a loaf of bread, Before we got any, I had to take, 4 or 5 loaves to her best kumatis. They called each other kumatis. If they had a woman that baptized your daughter or your son, then they became kumatis. And if the husband was involved in baptizing or confirming one of your kids, he was kumpari. Compari and Comari, Kumari and Kumpari. Well, anyway, I'd had to take a lot of bread. Before anybody got any bread, we have to take, give this loaf of bread to her, give this loaf of bread to Kumari Rose, and then we got to eat bread after I delivered bread. We never got to eat that first bread. Then the guy on the back of the railroad cars, we had 21 to 30 cars coming down out of the holler from the mines of Carolina making that turn in front of where we lived. The train was like from here to our front steps of the store that we had, a little store. I guarantee it was from the steps to the railroad track was from here to that TV. That's how far the train came to our store.
10 feet.
10, 12 feet.
Wow.
And I'll tell you, when it passed 4 o'clock in the morning, everybody was up, man. That thing come wolfing down there with that poof, 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 engine, steam engine. It wasn't no diesel. That damn thing come roaring down there with about 30 coal cars behind it. And then the guy in the last car, his name was Stomacher, he reminded me of Santa Claus, a great big fat guy. He'd get 4 or 5 lumps of coal big as this table, have them lined up on the edge of the boxcar.
No way. As big as that table.
Yeah, lumps of coal big as that TV. A lump of coal, big lumps of coal.
I thought a lump like in a pail. Lump.
Well, when it fell, when he kicked it off the edge of that top of that train, when that train was going slow down around those turns, that coal would fall, hit the ground, it would break into lumps like that. And then we'd go along the tracks after the train left, and that was our coal for that. That's the way we got our coal. We didn't have to buy no coal. But as the train passed, my mom had a loaf of bread, one of the loaves of bread about that long, about that tall, and about that wide, see? And split it and put fresh butter in there and wrap it up real good. And then we'd throw it up to him at the end of that train because it would go slow and it'd be colder than blue hell up there, boy. And he'd sit up there and eat that bread.
Oh, that's so nice.
Yeah, and sometimes the train would stop and he'd come down and we'd give him some moonshine, take a good drink of moonshine.
Colder than
Okay.
hell.
So cool.
Do you use that coal to heat your house, or do you have central heat?
Central heat, yeah. You know what our central heat was? It was the smallest grate that you could buy. It looked like a little bread basket about like that. It had two hooks on it, and it hooked into the wall in this one room that had this little fireplace. That's the only heat we had in that house. The 3 rooms. The Johns were outside. You had to walk like from here to the pool to go to the outdoor privy. Well, we had also a porcelain pot beside the bed. 5 boys in one bed. We never slept long ways in the bed. We always slept horizontally because we couldn't fit. And my brother Sam, the dentist, he was the only one that had a urinary problem. Now, when he started pissing his pants about 2 o'clock in the morning, all of us had long underwear on, and man, when that little fireplace went out, there was no heat. There was ice on the inside of the window like that, 1 inch thick on the inside of the house. Only had one window in that room. And it was single pane. It was not no thermopane like that fish tank. I mean, thin as newspaper, like here. That was the thickness of the glass. Well, hell, that coal would come right through there, and that ice would form on the inside just from the moisture from our breath. It was enough moisture to form ice. Just after my brother pissed off everybody.
So you
Oh my
you
God.
throw it and get warm, or I mean,
Get warm, he'd pee all over you in hell. It was colder than blue hell. And then finally when you got up, to kneel down, there was 4 of us around that little pot, and everybody pissing on each other. There was no light. We knew there was a white pot there. But hell, you couldn't name that thing. It's half asleep. Everybody just pissed on everybody.
I mean, it's like those puppies. It's really like progression, man.
You get up in the morning, hell, and those damn long underwear, they'd just freeze on you. I mean, if you didn't keep covered, boy, you just froze.
How long did Uncle Sam have?
He just had a problem for a long time. He could never hold his urine,
Yeah.
Well, then one time, we did have a coal stove in the kitchen. That's what my mother cooked on. 4 burners. You'd put a little bit of wood, kindling wood, a little bit of paper. That would start the fire. And then you'd put a lump of coal on there, a little lump of coal like that. You had 4 holes, 4 burners, and you'd fill one up, catch it, then you start another one, and by the time you got the 3rd or 4th burner lit, and it was all iron, it produced a lot of heat. And a lot of times we'd get up, we'd go in the kitchen and wait and pile around that stove and get warm. So this one morning, my brother Jack, he was the guy that took care of the stove. He knew how to light a fire. Well, this one morning, my dad, the night before, he said, Jack, said, tomorrow morning, Sam's sick, you get up and light the fire. Okay. It was just reversed. He told Sam to get up and light because Jack was sick. And so I went, he said, Pete, come on with me, we'll light this fire together. Well, I didn't know how to light a fire. And he kneeled him down on the floor, and he lit the fire. He put wet wood and twigs and kindling in there, and wet paper and everything. And,
Almost. Keep on.
Anyway, the damn fire would not light, and he was down underneath, laying on his stomach, and I was too, blowing up underneath the thing to get the little thing to ignite. Well, it never would ignite. Is it over?